All right. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're logging on from. My name is Marla Lazarus, and I am with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And just want to welcome you to our webinar today. This webinar is part of our Workshop Wednesdays webinar series. And this particular webinar is going to talk about interviewing in a virtual world. So we are very excited and glad to have you join us today. We hope you get a lot out of this. Want to let you know that we will be emailing out the slides that we go over today to everyone that pre-registered for this event. So you don't have to worry about taking too copious of notes. This webinar is also being recorded. We will be posting it to our YouTube channel at the beginning of next month, along with our other webinar that we conducted earlier this month. So each month we will post our webinars from the previous month on our YouTube channel. And my colleague Sean Forbes will post the link to our Careers at CMS playlist on YouTube in the chat box for everyone to jot down. And lastly, I do want to mention that you can use the Q&A box for any questions that you may have throughout the event. Again, my colleague will be monitoring the question and answer box. And if anything needs to be addressed verbally, I will address that at the end. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone is settled in. Don't expect this to be too long. But again, if you have any questions throughout, feel free to use the Q&A box. So again, my name is Marla Lazarus. I am the recruitment coordinator with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. We are one agency under the Department of Health and Human Services, headquartered in Baltimore, Maryland. That's where I am calling in from today, but we also have regional offices around the country as well. So we're excited to present this topic to you today. Some things we'll talk about today as far as virtual interviewing is concerned. First, we're going to talk about setting the stage. Second, we'll talk about the execution of the actual interview and then any follow-up items following a virtual interview. All right, so the first thing I wanted to relay is that nearly everyone knows, and it's common knowledge that, it's really important to make a good first impression. But what this quote says is almost everyone will make a good first impression, but only a few will make a good lasting impression. So that's really going to be the theme of today's event, is how do you make a lasting impression? So when a manager is doing interviews, especially in a virtual world where you don't get that face-to-face interaction per se, at least in the physical sense, how do you make them remember you? So that's some of the things we're going to, kind of the theme that will be weaved in the information today. So setting the stage is extremely important. So your prep before the interview is almost just as important as the interview itself. So we're going to go over a few things. So the first thing is testing your technologies. So super duper important. Make sure you test everything. So some of the things you may not think about. You want to obviously familiarize yourself with the platform. So every organization is going to potentially use a different platform for their virtual interviewing. At CMS, we use Zoom most of the time, but we also have WebEx. You might use, or some organizations might use Microsoft Teams or Google Meet. So just make sure whatever platform is being used, you request that ahead of time, or typically you'll be able to see that in the link that you're forwarded for your interview. And just make sure you test it out. You get familiar with it. You understand the different features that it has and that type of thing. So make sure you test the platform. Second is to make sure you test your device, whatever device you're going to be using, whether that be a computer or an iPad or whatever type of tablet you're using. Make sure you test that ahead of time. You want to make sure all of your updates are complete. So you want to test it really recent to the actual interview. So you don't want to test it 3 days, or you can test it 3 days before, but you also want to test it like a couple hours before. So the last thing you want is turning your computer on 10 minutes before the interview is happening, and then all of a sudden it needs to perform those like required updates, and it takes 15 minutes to update your computer. So definitely don't want that to happen. So make sure you test it out a little prior to, and then really right before the event itself. You want to also test your camera. So make sure you turn your camera on. If you have small children like me, you might need to like wipe off the lens a little bit, depending on how involved your kids are with your electronics. So just make sure you test your camera, everything's working correctly, and it's presenting a clear picture. Obviously, you want to test your mic and headphones as well. If you have access to the platform that the organization is going to be using, or if they have a free version of it, might pay to do a quick test call with a friend or family member. So again, you get familiar with not only the platform and its home site or its homepage, but actually using the video calling as well. So you know the different features when you're actually on the call. And at that point, you can also test your mic and or headphones if you're going to be using those. Lastly, obviously, you want to make sure your device is charged up or keep it plugged in while you're during the interview itself. So setting the scene and minimizing distractions is really going to help you perform your best during the interview itself. So you want to make sure you're in a very quiet area, as quiet as can be. We all know we're in this in the world we live in today. Some of us are still working from home. Some of us may not be working, but just home with family. Some of our kids are still home. So we understand, and managers obviously understand that circumstances are different for everyone, and everyone might not be able to get away from friends or distractions during an interview, but you just want to keep it as quiet as possible. Make sure you inform everybody that is in your household that you are going to be on an important call, and to stay as quiet as possible. One thing we don't often think about is, especially during this time in the spring, if you're near windows, make sure your windows are closed. The last thing you want is for, the next door neighbors to be cutting their lawn, and then all of a sudden you just hear throughout the interview. So make sure your windows are closed, and again, it can be as quiet as possible wherever you are. You want to have either a plain or professional background. So you see that I have a virtual background on promoting our Workshop Wednesdays webinar series. So you may or may not have the ability, depending on the platform, to have a virtual background. So you may just have to have whatever is in your background showing. So I would say that worst case scenario, just have a plain wall behind you. But if you have a professional setup of some kind, some sort of home office, obviously that's acceptable as well. I will show you an example. So I have this, our virtual background for our Workshop Wednesday series. But what you will see is if I take that off and I show you what I'm really sitting in front of, it's just my kitchen, right? So nobody really wants to see my refrigerator and my pantry door. Another thing is, if you're sitting in this kind of area, sometimes it's distracting for the interviewer. And it can make it a little less formal in a world where it's already kind of less formal in and of itself because it's virtual. But sitting in front of something like this makes an interviewer might feel like they're like having lunch with you instead of really doing an interview with you. And that might go over well for some, and some might be turned off by it. So just keep it as professional as possible. So put my virtual background back on because nobody wants to see my refrigerator. So we talked about the backgrounds. Make sure your device is stationary. I don't really care if you're using your phone to do your interview. That's completely fine. A lot of people use their phones for almost everything nowadays. But just make sure it's stationary. So it's propped up against something and you're not holding it, because even if you try to hold it very still, you're still going to have some movement. And one, it might be a turnoff again to managers, or it might not sit well with managers. Some people don't do well with like kind of motion sickness, that type of thing. And so sometimes the video calls can affect that. So just make sure it's stationary, even if it is your phone. Make sure you silence all notifications on any devices around you. So that would be including any phones, tablets, whatever device you're using, and make sure you silence those notifications as well. So sometimes if you're on your computer and you have your email set up to where it gives you a ding every time an email comes in, and you're getting emails all throughout the interview, sometimes people can hear that on the other end, depending on how your device is set up. So make sure you silence your notifications. And lastly, make sure you have water close by. So I always keep my water jug close by. Inevitably, every single time I do a webinar, I always have a coughing attack. So hopefully we'll cross our fingers for this time. But I'm going to pause and take a sip here just to try to prevent it. So just make sure you have water close by. If something does happen, at least you don't have to go running for it. Okay, so we'll move on. Next thing. Okay, so checking your video is super important. So we talked about testing your camera, but the angle of your video is also super important. So I don't know if you've ever been on a video call or a meeting, or maybe an interview where somebody has, like on the lower left-hand corner, the gentleman, where this is all you see. You know, that is okay, but it's not really ideal. So ideal would be like chest or shoulder level up. You don't necessarily want to be able to see your whole body. That's a little too far back, but just seeing your face. I participated in a meeting, in a weekly meeting, where one of my colleagues, that is his entire setup for some reason, that his device is so close to his face that we literally only get like this in the camera every week. So it's always a little amusing, but probably not the best light you want to put yourself in for an interview. Speaking of lighting, that's super important as well. So when you're using a camera on any device, you never want to be backlit. So what that means is you don't want to sit in front of a window or a door that has glass. So for instance, the woman you see on the screen that's in the top left-hand corner, she is backlit. So you can see the window behind her, and you can see she's all shadowy. And that's just because the light is coming from behind her. And that's typically what happens anytime you sit in front of a window, unless you have really good lighting in front of you as well. So you definitely want to make sure you're not backlit, and make sure your lighting is as good as it can be. I will say that natural lighting is the best lighting. So if you have an area wherever you're going to be, whether it be in your home or somewhere else, where the natural light can be in front of you, that's going to be ideal. But if not, just try to create it as best you can. So for instance, I am sitting obviously in my kitchen. It is a pretty well lit kitchen, even though it's a pretty, looks pretty cloudy outside today. But I also have my overhead lights on from my island, my large kitchen lights on, as well as a desktop lamp right in front of me. So if I turn that off, you can just see it gets a little darker. It's still fine for this, but if the rest of the room wasn't so well lit, I might be a little dark. And this is literally just like a desk, like a regular desk lamp that I just have up to make the lighting as effective as possible. And like I said, you don't want to sit too close or too far away. The woman, the example in the middle, is like a good kind of middle of the road, you know, again, from the chest up. And you can kind of catch everything without being distracted by how inappropriate they are in the screen. That's helpful. Oh, one other thing I wanted to talk about is the angle of your camera itself. Sometimes what you'll see is like people that have stuff like really high up, or more often I would say like down kind of far, and you're looking down at your device. So again, I would say the most effective angle is going to be eye level. So for me, I'm going to show you, I wasn't planning on doing this, but it is a kind of comical setup today. So I'm in my kitchen because that's where I get my best light. Here's my kitchen. So today, what I have my daughter's pouches. That's what my computer is sitting on. So it's eye level to me. I have an empty Amazon box with a phone propped up against my blender. And that's where I have a few notes so I don't miss anything that I want to talk about today. So again, whatever it is, I only showed you that to show you that whatever your setup is, nobody's going to see it. So just make it as beneficial and professional as possible for you. My background back on. Got it. Okay. So moving on. Slides. Okay, so we talked about lasting impressions and some of the things to do to really make a lasting impression on the managers that you're talking to. is making sure that you do your research ahead of time, right? And this applies to virtual interviews, in-person interviews, no matter what. Make sure you do your research. You want to, one, plan your questions, whether you're asked for questions, whether you have any questions at the end or not, you want to have questions already prepared in your head that you want to ask. You want to make sure you're not asking any questions that are readily available to you or readily available to the public on their website, right? So you don't want to start asking like general questions that you could have easily done with 5 minutes of research. So some of those questions that you have at the end of interview might come from the questions itself during the interview. So that might spawn a few questions for you that are appropriate. I will say that those are probably more effective because they seem less rehearsed, I'll say. So it really seems like you're engaged and participative in the interview when you're asking questions that came out of the questions asked to you. But either way, whether that happens or not, you definitely want to at least have a couple prepared questions. So if a manager does ask you, do you have any questions for me? You don't say no. That's the last thing you want to do. It just comes off, whether it's true or not, it comes off as disinterested. So you never want to say no. You always want to have a couple questions already prepared. You also want to have a more than one question prepared, because if you only have one and that question is answered in the beginning, and then you feel stuck because you don't have anything. So you want to have a few questions prepared in case you're asked, or at the end, whether you're asked or not, if you really do want to know the answers to those, so you can ask those as well. For virtual interviews, you also want to make sure you dress the part. Obviously, we are all in this virtual world now. A lot of people are still working at home, and it might be a little more casual, and that's okay for the interviewer. But as the interviewee, you still want to present your best foot forward. And so if you're interviewing for a professional job, you want to dress as if you were in person for that interview. So just think in-person interview when you are getting dressed. Okay, so now it's showtime. So we've set the stage, we've done the preparation, we've done our research. What now? The average length of an interview in general is about 45 minutes. Could be very common that a virtual interview could be shorter. Sometimes there's less chit chat or banter in a virtual interview because you don't have that face-to-face connection. So don't be too concerned if it's shorter, but I would say average length is about 45 minutes. Obviously, it can go longer. Sometimes the theory is that people think that if it's a longer interview, it went better. Wouldn't say that's always the case. So again, I wouldn't be too concerned if it was shorter, especially when we're talking about virtual interviewing. So another thing you want to really, really do in preparation for your interview is to practice. And that seems kind of weird to some people. But here's the thing. So at CMS, I can't speak for all organizations, but at CMS, we use something called behavioral-based interviewing questions. And so what this examples of behavioral-based interviewing questions is like, tell me about a time or give me an example of, and I'll go over a couple of them. But it's less, have you done this? And more, tell me about a time when you did this. So because of that, it's going to take some forethought on the part of the interviewee to really come up with thoughtful responses. So some examples, like I said, are some common interview questions would be, give me an example of a time you faced a conflict while working on a team. How did you handle it? How did you overcome it? Again, these are really open-ended questions. So you're forced to give an example of times that you dealt with certain situations. Tell me about a time you were under a lot of pressure. What was going on? How did you get through it? So again, a lot of it is going to be dependent on the job that you're interviewing for. But I would say more and more organizations are moving towards these types of questions. So doing a little research on behavioral-based interviewing questions, and then coming up with some experiences that you already have in your head to share ahead of time before the interview is really going to be helpful to you during the interview itself. So make sure you think of tangible examples. Some of the common topics or themes around interviewing questions, again, depending on The job itself could be customer service, teamwork, adaptability, communication, conflict resolution, time management, management style, if that's applicable, if you're interviewing for a management job, values, all these other topics that you can find related questions. If you just do a Google search for behavioral based interviewing questions, you'll find tons and tons of examples. Pick a few if you think those topics will come up based on the job you're applying or interviewing for. Pick a few, come up with some examples. Some of the examples are going to be able to flow and answer different questions. So as long as you have a few already in your head, you're going to be that much farther ahead when they come up. The other thing is you want to prepare, but you also don't want to sound scripted. So I know that is kind of an oxymoron. So you want to prepare and have these experiences, but you don't really want to like write it out and memorize it per se. You lived it, you know it. So don't memorize it and sound like you're reading from a script, but do be prepared to answer those types of questions. 1 second. Okay. So again, lasting good impressions. So this is specific really to the virtual environment. So when you're in the room with somebody, you know that you should sit up. Your body language, you know, communicates a lot during any type of interaction, especially an interview. If I'm sitting slouched like this the whole time, you know, again, it appears unengaged, disinterested from a manager standpoint. So the same thing applies to the virtual world. So you want to make sure you're sitting up. I keep a pillow right behind me on my chair when I do, when I conduct meetings or conduct webinars. So it kind of forces me to sit up because I have horrible posture. So I'm going to make sure you sit up, you're smiling. So the manager doesn't have the advantage of seeing your entire body to kind of read that body language. So they really only get this. So you want to make sure if you're excited about the job or you know what you're interviewing for, that you show that on your face. So again, think in person, but just know that it has to be all right here, and you don't get the benefit of the full interaction in person. The other thing that's going to be difficult, but I encourage you to try really hard to do, is to make a connection. I would say it's easier to do that in person. You have the time where you might be escorted from the front of the building to wherever you're going to be interviewed, to kind of make small talk and you know, build a rapport with that person. Whereas in a virtual environment, you don't really get that time. So I would say as much as possible, be personable. And if there is time to have a kind of a not professional, but maybe not exactly related to the interview, if you're able to chat or again, make a connection in any way that's personable, I encourage you to do that. And this really just goes to how you come across. So confidence is very attractive. So what I say is confidence with a side of humility is really, really attractive, right? So you don't want to be so confident that you cross the line over into cockiness. So if you're confident, but have some humility about it, I think that is probably what comes across best to managers. And just be yourself. So you want a job where you're going to fit in uh, uh, to the dynamic of the work group. And so the best way to do that is to be yourself. If you come across completely different than you actually are, and the manager thinks you would be a good fit for the organization, and then you get to work and you're a completely different person because you put on a show for the interview, it may not be a good fit for you for that job. So I would just say be yourself, be authentic. Authenticity is key, and that really comes across, I would say, to managers. Time, we're doing well. So another thing that's really specific to the virtual environment is the common virtual courtesy, right? So it is going to be a little different than in person. So during regular interviews, I always encourage candidates to not be afraid of the silence and not be afraid to take a pause if they're thinking for an answer, an appropriate answer for one of the questions. One, you're going to give a better answer if you take a second to gather your thoughts and really present the best situation. So for instance, going back to the behavioral-based interviewing, you're thinking of the most appropriate experience to share based on the question they ask. It might take 10 or 15 seconds to really come up with that, go through the Rolodex in your head of your different experiences and come up with the best one. And in an in-person interview, that is completely acceptable because the manager is right there and they know that you heard them and that they know you're thinking of an answer. In the virtual world, it is also okay to pause and take a second and gather your thoughts. But sometimes in the virtual world, the manager doesn't know whether you're just pausing or whether the screen froze or whether they broke up and you didn't hear them. What I would encourage you to do is just take a second and just let them know that you're pausing to think of a response. So just a quick, hey, I'm going to take 1 second to think about that. Take a second, think about it, and respond. So that's a little different than an in-person. So explaining any long pauses, signaling when your answers are complete. So a lot of times if you have been participating in meetings in this virtual world, a lot of times what happens is people tend to talk over people because they don't know when they're done or they're trying to cut in, the other person's trying to cut in. And so there's a lot of like double talk where you're both silent for like 5 seconds and it's a weird, awkward silence. So just signaling when your answers are complete, like a head nod or anything like that can help the manager know when you're done talking. And then in the same vein, letting the other person finish speaking. So again, it's really easy to talk over people. And then sometimes there's a delay, depending on your Wi-Fi strength and all of that. Sometimes there might be a couple second delay in your video feed and your audio feed. So just making sure you give time to let the other person finish speaking. And then finally, following up. And so this is a big one because I think some people get hung up on when to follow up, how often to follow up, that type of thing. So what I would encourage is that if you want to do an immediate follow-up, I would say that some managers would be looking for that. Not all of them. I haven't come across any that would be turned off by it. Some are looking for it and some don't really care about it. That's my experience with managers. But if you want to do an immediate follow-up, I would say that would be within 24 hours, a simple email. Thank you for your time. If you wanted to include something that came up during the interview itself, that would, again, just set you apart from other people or just sending a blanket thank you. But keeping it short and not asking questions in the email. It's simply a follow-up. Do not expect a response, although some managers may choose to respond. One of the questions that you can ask at the end of the interview, if the manager hasn't already relayed this information to you, would be when do you expect to make decisions or when do you expect to follow up with candidates that you've interviewed? So whatever the manager says, so whether that be a week, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, however long the manager expects to take to make a decision, after you send your initial 24-hour follow-up, do not follow up before then. So even the day of, I might give it a couple days. Things come up, managers can be busy and maybe they thought it was going to be 2 weeks exactly, but it turned out to be closer to 3. I would say definitely 100% no, do not follow up and ask, what's the status before whatever stated time that they told you during the interview of how long they would take to make decisions. I would say it is okay to follow up at the time they stated, but my personal recommendation would be to give it another few days to another week, knowing that things can come up unexpectedly and maybe they didn't get to it as soon as they had hoped. So, and that would again just be a simple follow-up for a status. Other than that, if there are specific questions around the job itself, I would say really try to prepare ahead of time, gather your thoughts during the interview and ask them during the interview. Most managers will ask you if you have any questions at the end of the interview. So that's really your time to get the information that you want. One of the things I would also avoid is asking questions about flexibilities. if it's not obvious, right? So we're in this state where some organizations are back in the office, some organizations are fully virtual. Completely acceptable to ask about like what the work arrangement would be right now and when and if that would change. Totally fine. Outside of, so post COVID, we're talking about a different time, asking about different flexibilities as far as like time off and working at home and those type of things. I would say save that for if you are offered a tentative job. Then that's the time to kind of get down to the details of those types of flexibilities. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the meat of this. What I want to do is, I know I see the chat box was going and some questions were being answered. Wanted to check in real quick with Sean to see if there's any questions I can answer verbally.
Yeah, hey Marla. So just a question here that I think would benefit everybody. So the question is, and I think everybody finds this question difficult to answer, but the question is, what is your weakest and strongest ability? How do you go about answering something like that?
That's a great question. So I think the strongest ability is a little easier for candidates to answer. And I don't mean it in a way of, again, coming from a cocky place, but it's just a little easier to kind of draw on your strengths and communicate those. I think most people get hung up on what to present as their weakness. And so I will tell you my personal opinion on that particular item. And so it's something I struggled with. The advice I was given was that although it is a weakness, you should do your best to present it in a positive light. So that's not to sugarcoat anything. And so, for instance, I am a perfectionist, right? So while that can be taken as a good thing, that I have a lot of attention to detail, sometimes it can also slow me down on some things. So if I was asked that question, that is what I would say. I know I can be a perfectionist and I work on that. But sometimes it takes me a couple times to review things where somebody else might just review it once. I might read through it 3 or 4 times. So taking what you may perceive as your weaknesses, and I would do a very honest self-inventory of that. And then presenting it in a light where you don't want to try to gaslight the person you're talking to, obviously, but presenting it in as much of a positive light as possible. So instead of, let me try to think of an example, saying let me think. So if you know that you are a big picture person, you have little attention to detail, your work has typically come back with a lot of edits, depending on what the job is. So instead of saying I have no attention to detail, a lot of times my work has to be revised, you might say, I tend to complete my work quickly because I'm a more big picture type of person. So some of the things I try to work on is really slowing down and getting it done correctly the first time. Again, just taking what you know to be true and trying to present it in a positive light. So I hope that helped. Sean, is there anything else?
Yeah, so we have another one in the Q&A, and let's see. So, if you're interviewing with a panel, is it mandatory to request their emails so that you can send thank you emails? How would you go about requesting that information if you wanted to send your follow-up?
Great question. So a lot of times you may already have the email from the initial outreach to actually do the interview. But then again, sometimes it's a manager's special assistant or scheduler scheduling that interview. So you may not. I would say it is wholly appropriate to ask for their emails and I would say to send a follow-up email. because managers also may want to know that you don't plan on following up 20 times. So some managers may have had bad experiences with that. But I would say, yes, if you don't already have their email, I would say it is appropriate the end of the interview to request it. Great question, by the way.
Great, thank you. I'm just answering a few of the couple others that are in the Q&A, but I think that's everything.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so at this time, I am going to launch a quick poll. If you could just respond with your honesty, it's all anonymous. We just want to try to get some feedback for these webinars that we're doing. So I'm going to launch the poll. Feel free to respond. Not going to share the results. We just want to keep them for ourselves. And while you guys are doing that, it's just a few, but 5 questions or so. Just want to thank you for your participation today. Again, we hope you got a lot out of this. Don't forget that we will be sending you the slides by email. So we have, based on your pre-registration, everybody's email. So you will get the slide deck probably within the next couple of hours. The video for this recording will be posted to YouTube again early next month. So the first week in May. And just a reminder that we are doing this workshop series, this webinar series, every first and third Wednesday from April through December. So feel free, if you just got the information for this particular webinar, you can go back to that same pre-registration site that you registered for this one and register for any of our other webinars coming up. The very next event will be a federal hiring overview, so a condensed version. So we have specific webinars that are going to be for resume writing, for the USC jobs application process, for our pathways programs. But the very next webinar will be a condensed version of those 3 topics. So it'll be kind of a compilation of those 3 topics. So feel free, like I said, to register for any of our upcoming events, and we look forward to having you on future webinars. So again, thank you for your time today, and hope you have a great rest of your week.